Idea of who you are. What three main bits of information can you tell us about yourself that, that help us get a good idea of who you are?
Um, of who I am. Okay, so I suppose, kind of first and foremost, a very keen conservationist and naturalist who has had an obsession, and it is an obsession with natural history pretty much my entire life. I'm a family man. I have a wife and two young children, and very much try and involve my whole family in what I do, both through my hobbies and interests, which is natural history, but also music, but also making them very aware that you can pursue a career in the things that you love. So very much get them involved in my work life as well, which they absolutely detest. um, but it's lovely. It's a nice way to spend a lot of time as a family, especially when you work in natural history and conservation. Um, and like any kind of 40-year-old man, I kind of enjoy cycling, I enjoy music, I play guitar, and spend a lot of time immersing myself in creative uh, ways to kind of express myself creatively through either music or by engaging with people and educating
So
people.
then, what do you understand by the term purpose? And then we could maybe look at some of those things through that lens.
Yeah, when you invited me on to come and do this, and you asked the question, or you said it was going to be about purpose, I thought about it a lot because you spend the first few years of your career or your life through your teens, 20s, 30s trying to figure out where you fit in all of this. And it kind
Mm.
of takes quite a long time. And I've gone through lots of different jobs thinking I've had a purpose, knowing full well that I've not had a purpose in certain jobs. Um, but when you know. And for me, because conservation I hold so dear to my heart, and because conservation is a subject that is so broad, but um, is under threat. A big part of my job is dealing with big environmental issues, but also celebrating environmental successes and working towards environmental successes. My purpose, I feel, is twofold. It's kind of, one is actually working on the issue itself, rectifying either declines or um, a big part of my work has been species recovery work, which is just fantastic. But then the other part is education, and conservation is nothing without educating. And a big part of my work is working with the public, with school children, with businesses and other organizations about how they can understand, either they can either make things better or, some of the issues that we collectively face.
It sounds like it's very real time. This must happen now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, there's been lots of opportunities that have arisen. So the main bulk of my work is within a charity that I co-founded back in 2013 called Birds of Poole Harbour. So I'm a founder of that charity and a trustee, but I'm also involved in, obviously, kind of build the work of the charity, even volunteering to run parts of the charity as well. And it is very immediate. I mean, it's a very small charity. We're only kind of 5 or 6 people involved in the charity, but the way that we get a lot of stuff done and the way that we work so effectively and efficiently is because we've managed to build a fantastic team around us. And that enhances, personally for me, that enhances my personal purpose, because I know that when you have a good team around you, you can obviously achieve a lot more. And the opportunities that have arisen post COVID, and I suppose it's one of the kind of the benefits of the last 2 years, in amongst lots and lots of negatives, is that people came out of lockdowns and post COVID really environmentally aware. So lots of people that who during lockdown were forced to walk in local parks or in local neighborhoods or local countryside, me being one of them, I found some amazing places right on my doorstep that I had no idea were there because I was forced to go there due to lockdown. And out of that, we have seen a huge spike in interest in our work because of that. So we now have a brand new audience, and it's building and growing all the time, of people who want to take that next step, that next level of understanding, who, you know, maybe used to walk their dog in a certain area, but now still walk that dog in that certain area, but want to know what birds it is they're seeing, why they're there, what they can do in their own homes to attract these birds, or whatever it is. So that is really helped develop our purpose over the last, well, year now.
So, I mean, where we live, so we don't live too far away. I'm in between Poole and Bournemouth. You're more into the rural area, but still attached to urban life up in Litchfield and Travers. I think where we live is sometimes when we say conservation, we might think of someone, you know, chasing a mountain lion in Patagonia, but it can happen right here in your back garden. I love the idea of the disruption that COVID created. And I say that disruption is the breeding ground for creativity, but it's also the breeding ground for maybe simply noticing these things that you've mentioned, like the bird life. What is that bird? When we have things taken away from us, which COVID did on many levels, it seems like it just cleared the vision, the view of that stuff, whatever that might be, whether it's a commute, technology, whatever it might be. And then what's still here, where it's maybe the birds in my back garden, or like you said about the walks you discovered, the places that you've been to locally.
Yeah.
So what's the question here? The question, I suppose, would be, what would be a great step someone can take to play a role in conservation?
Good question. I mean, there's so many different things. Obviously, we're going through a cost of living crisis at the moment, and everyone is kind of watching how they're using their energy bills. You know, becoming much more energy efficient is the big one, I suppose, at the moment. But that is something people can do in their homes, and there's lots of different methods and ways you can learn how to become energy efficient in your own home. Outside of your house, separate to your car, I guess, starting at home, and just the perfect example of this, I've just seen down the end of my road in the last couple of weeks. So it's going to get a bit negative now. The UK, scientifically, is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. It's awful. It's horrendous.
So scientifically, the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world.
Proven. So there was a report published,
wow,
a UN report published, about 8-9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that ranked how well each country does globally in terms of how they protect nature, and the UK is one of the worst. And there's lots and lots of different reasons for that. And we're an island nation. 75% of our land use is for farming, a lot of that intensive farming. So that means huge tracts of land across the whole of the UK is sprayed with really dangerous pesticides, lots and lots of fertilizers, all those kind of things. We still have illegal hunting going on. We have polluted rivers, all the, you know, it's a terrible thing. So your question about what can people do, start in your own back gardens. I mean, there's been this mentality over the last 30-40 years that scrub, big bushes, rough areas in your garden are a bad thing. They're not. They're the most productive, most important habitats across the landscape. And just at the end of my road, there's been this huge bush, lots of different native species of shrub in this bush that has had this big population of house sparrows since we moved into the road 12 years ago. And they've just got rid of the whole thing. Oh. And it just makes, it may seem only like a small little bush, but it has so much importance. And actually, when you look at how much gardens are streamlined these days, even with fake grass being put down, when so many areas are doing that, it makes a huge impact nationally. So I'd say just simple things, you know, let people, you know, if you have got gardens, let parts of them grow wild, plant up native pollinator, nectar bearing trees, bushes, shrubs, all those things. Get bees, birds, butterflies back in the garden again. Because it may seem small, but that is such a huge help. It really is.
So sort of letting go of the manicured appearance of a garden, maybe accepting a wild look as something that's great because of what you've explained in terms of what it can contain.
Absolutely. And the other nice thing as well is, and the growth of social media has really helped allow this, and advances in, or progression in conservation organizations where they want to connect with people, is there are great initiatives where people can get involved in what's called citizen science. So whereas conservation historically was always only ever carried out by either scientists or wardens on nature reserves, or people who had a great understanding of the natural world. Well, that's completely different now. Organizations like the RSPB, the BTO, which is the British Trust for Ornithology, now set out scientific surveys that the public can get involved in themselves, and it is massive. So the perfect example is the Big Garden Bird Watch, which is hosted by the RSPB. It happens every January. It's only one day or maybe 2 days over a weekend in January. And it's the largest collection of scientific data of bird populations in the whole country, and it's carried out by the general public. And there's a whole load of different examples. I mean, I personally manage something called the Poole Harbour Wetland Bird Surveys, and it's the data from those surveys, which is carried out by volunteers. I've got a team of 30 volunteers that help me with this. And the data collected from those surveys is one of the reasons Poole Harbour is afforded its protection, its SPA, Special Protection Area designation. So, and that, again, that is giving volunteers an opportunity to have a purpose in making sure that the volunteering that they're doing has an absolute cause and purpose.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So love that. Spreading the accessibility to a purpose, and also not like just a personal purpose, something that's you're interconnected. If you've got 30 volunteers already with the Poole Harbour Wetland Bird Survey, but anything like what did you say, the citizen science, so the Back Garden Bird Watch or the Big Garden Bird Watch.
Yeah,
I like the idea of connection, and this is another thing I love about technology and that kind of connectivity, is you can find your tribe in a way.
Oh, without a doubt. And like I said, social media has helped that no end. I mean, I was a closet bird watcher when I was at school. I told nobody that I was into natural history. In fact, actually, my main interest when I was at school was something called herpetology, which sounds blimmin' awful, but it's the study of reptiles and amphibians. And so when I was a teenager, I was a herpetologist.
Herpetologist, okay, all right.
And I told nobody about my interest in nature, because there were not many other people that are interested in it. It was always deemed a bit sad, a bit geeky. And the funniest thing actually was when I left a job. I had a job where I was sailing around the world. It was lovely. It was brilliant. But I met my now wife, Philippa. So this was 15 years ago. And I left the boat from sailing around the world, and we came back to the UK. And she goes, "Well, what are you going to do for a job? What is it you like doing?" And I said to her, "Well, I like birds." And she just went, "What?" And I kind of talked through this interest I had in natural history, and she did, bless her, she encouraged me. She said, "Well, go and get a job with the RSPB or something like that." And I thought, no chance. I've got no qualifications in natural history, but I did. I managed to get a job within a few months at the big RSPB nature reserve here in Poole Harbour, Arn, big flagship reserve. And that is when I realized what my purpose was. It was absolutely nailed on then. When I got into that position, having never had a job in conservation before, within a week, I slipped into that job, and I thought, right, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life.
What's that like to know to arrive at that point? You've gone to Arn. So for people who are watching who are not from this area, Arn is an area at the back of Poole Harbour. Paul, well, you introduce Arn first of all, Paul. What is Arn?
It's, if you look at Poole Harbour on a map, along the southern shores, there's a big, huge mass that sticks out into Poole Harbour, and that is Arn. That's the big RSPB nature reserve. It's all treble SI, site of special scientific interest, because of the heathlands, and then all the heathlands to the south of it, which is managed by the private landowners or the National Trust, and that's all lovely big tracts of heathland. It's a special area. Poole Harbour is, in terms of its importance, is critical. I mean, it's an SPA, it's a special protection area. It's full of treble SI, sites of special scientific interest. It's a designated Ramsar site, which means it's recognised internationally as an important wetland. So it's you know, it's an important site environmentally. And so when I got the job at Arn, and you know, I realised I was able to talk so freely to like-minded people about why this was an important place, or you know, I could be as nerdy as I wanted, and people would be as nerdy back. It was brilliant. And I just felt at home, and I just thought it was a nice, you know, comfortable feeling, waking up every day just absolutely ready to go to work, literally running out of the house to get to work. And yeah, it was brilliant. But I had my frustrations, in as much that I was there for 2 years and I was only able to really talk about, well, I was really promoting Arn as a nature reserve, which I love doing, don't get me wrong, it's an amazing place. But really wanted to tell the whole picture of Poole Harbour and its functionality as an ecosystem. So I started just thinking about this idea about setting up a charity. I didn't know what it was going to be called, but just about how we promote conservation across the whole of Poole Harbour and how we educate bird populations across the whole of Poole Harbour. And that's when we decided to set up, me and some friends, we set up Birds of Poole Harbour as its own entity, which allowed us then to continue with this mission of pursuing our goals and pursuing our purpose of engaging with people, educating people. But it also allowed me and the people involved in the charity to start setting up our own projects, working with who we wanted to work with, you know, raising money and investing in projects that we thought would be valuable to both the environment and to people. And yeah, so that charity is now 10 years old, and it's growing and growing, which is really nice.
That's fantastic. So Arn sounds a bit like ground zero. This is where you just stepped into your purpose and it's felt right. You've been able to be nerdy with other people who are nerdy. Yeah. And to talk freely as well. Going back to when you were at school and being a herpetologist, and you didn't tell anyone, there's a certain amount of suppression going on. What do you fear would have happened if you had talked?
Get punched in the face.
I'm a herpetologist. Bang. Yeah.
I don't know, really. It was, you know, natural history wasn't accessible, really. And I mean, I mentioned earlier, social media now, conservation is now cool. It's important. People understand the environmental threats. They can learn about it, you know, whereas a lot of the information used to be buried in either scientific reports or held very tightly with the organizations that carried out those pieces of work. You know, I could go on Twitter now within 30 seconds and find 5 or 6 really important bits of data or information that are relevant to my work or relevant to my area, that is bite-sized, manageable for me to kind of get a grip with. And obviously that's not just accessible to me, that's accessible to everybody. And as it transpires, I mean, I've met so many conservationists my age or maybe even older, who all went through exactly the same thing when they were younger, didn't tell a soul. In fact, there's even a guy who I'm really friendly with now, old school friend. We only found out recently, having crossed paths, that we were both into natural history. I had no idea he was, like birds specifically. I had no idea at school that he was, and he had no idea at school that I was. And it's only until within the last couple of years we saw each other on social media. And we were like, "Are you into birds?" Yeah, I was into birds. And yeah, that's the way it is now. It's fascinating.
So what's the learning point there?
Not be afraid, you know. And I think certainly with my kids, whatever it is, whether it's natural history, whatever. But the thing is, like, nerdy's cool now, isn't it? Like being slightly different and, like, you know, having different interests. It's a very, very different time now. But I will say to my kids, whether they listen or not, is just whatever it is you're interested in, just go for it. Just go for it, embrace it, endorse it, work on it. And if it doesn't work out, find something else. But do not be afraid to from a young age, you know, get excited about the things you like.
Is that possible? You know, so do not be afraid. Is there a place for fear in a good way? So sometimes when I work with people who are trying to do something different, and they are fearful of rejection or fearful of having imposter syndrome. There's an obstacle that comes across their path, something that they feel. Yeah. And I say, I wonder if that means that you're on the right path, in that you have fear, in that you're finding this challenging. Maybe this tells you that you're going in the right direction. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I suffer that all the time. I work with lots and lots of people who really know their subject, who are great at what they do, and pretty much every week I get self-doubts about whether this is what I should be doing, or is this the right piece of work we should be focusing on. But like I said, I'm surrounded by very, very good people with lots of experience who can be very matter of fact about situations. And that's not easy for people to do, I don't think. I think it's so easy to be affected emotionally and personally by quite small things. It's you do have to be thick-skinned in a way to be able to deal with some of the challenges that come your way, whatever your career is. But the place to hide for us, actually, in the conservation sector, is the environment. Because you can be with a group of people and absolutely embrace the education side of it and the stuff that you're showing them. But also, if I'm having those moments where I'm just like worried about or self-doubting, I will go into nature. I have got very specific places in Poole Harbour that I go to where I will go and sit and reflect for an hour and go through that process of either building up my confidence again or figuring out how I'm going to deal with those issues.
Wow, I love that. I'm not going to ask you to divulge your places unless you want to, but that's something else that happened for people, I think, and definitely for me personally during lockdown. When I went through some pretty challenging times, you'd find me just sitting on a log in the New Forest, or walking around for 4 hours, and it was very calming. Allowed me to get away from all distractions. Whether I wanted to be on my phone or not, I didn't have any reception. It was lovely, and things just fell off me in terms of the weight on, the metaphorical weight on my shoulders.
Yeah.
So I think, I get that. I
was going to say, I'm not religious in any way, but I definitely have a spiritual connection to the harbour. I know that when I'm out in these certain places, or anywhere, to be honest, within the Poole Harbour area, I absolutely feel part of that landscape. Whether it's the smell of the coconut gorse in the early spring, or, at the moment, my favourite thing at the moment is there's a big group of birds arriving from Scandinavia called redwings, and you go out on an October evening. So anyone can do this. You go out into your back gardens at the moment. Actually, it's quite windy at the moment, so it might not be so good. But you can hear them in the dark listening. They make this very specific call as they fly over at night, and you can hear the redwings arriving from Scandinavia. And that reminds me of a very specific time from when I was probably, 11 or 12. And it just resets me. As soon as I hear the first redwings arriving from Scandinavia, I know everything's going to be all right. It's such a strange thing, but it's just that very, very emotional connection to the natural world and the things that are going on around me.
Okay, so and we are lucky in that we live very, very close to Poole Harbour. It is accessible, but as we've already discussed, we can connect by going and looking at the tree in the garden, or I think zooming in has been a big thing for me. Just simply noticing something or looking at a leaf, and this sounds geeky or nerdy, I know, but I remember my partner and I were walking in the New Forest, and this tree, I think it was a beech tree, had fallen down, and it was like it must have been frozen in the way that it shattered on the ground. But then there's another part of the tree, a different tree there, and it was, I think, part of an oak tree, And we started this process of like being detectives as to what we thought had happened, and started looking up and going, well, if that's that tree there and it fell down here, maybe it took that limb off that oak tree. And then you're looking over, and then you're noticing the beetles and what have you in there, and like suddenly we've been there for half an hour. And I think just that focusing in, you don't have to have a vista of wildness around you. It can be just a tree or a bush or
absolutely. I mean, and there's all the great thing about, and this definitely helps evolve my purpose with what we do, is there is always something else to learn. We'll never get to the bottom of a lot of the stuff that we're educating people about, or it may take many, many years, but we're learning new things all the time. And that is such a driver for keeping going, because that the next week or the following week or next spring or something like that, there's going to be this new big element of our work that we didn't know before, that we can add to our metaphorical scrapbooks, so to speak. But I suppose the main thing that's happened in my career, and I suppose this is without a doubt the highlight of my career, hands down, if 40-year-old Paul was going to speak to 10, 12, 13-year-old Paul and say, right, when you're 40 you would have accomplished this, I would never have believed them. And that was a couple of years ago, 2017, our charity, we began what's called an osprey reintroduction. So osprey is a wonderful bird of prey. It was completely eradicated from the UK 200 odd years ago by humans and never recovered. They were persecuted to extinction. So we began a project in the harbour in 2017 to try and restore a population. So we brought down wild osprey chicks from Scotland, where they're doing quite well up in Scotland, to try and get them to re-establish on the south coast. And we started that in 2017. And this spring and summer, we saw our first success, and we've managed to re-establish osprey on the south coast now, having been absent for 200 years. And it's been unbelievable, the response. And this has just catapulted my reason for doing what I do even further, because it highlighted for me the want from the general public for how they want the environment to improve. And we're using, so basically, the species the recovery of the species is always the most important element when you do these projects. That is the primary focus, but there is always going to be secondary benefits. And when we started the project in 2017, we did 3 boat trips around Poole Harbour to talk to people about the project and show them birds, the ospreys that were flying around. And we took out 150 people, I think, and we did 3 boat trips. This year we did 30 boat trips and took out 1,600 people. We sold 1,600 tickets for people wanting to come out around Poole Harbour, to come and learn about the project, to come and see ospreys in the wild. And the other thing that really helped, really helped, was our partners in that project. They're an organisation called the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation. They are at the same time the people that are running the white-tailed sea eagle reintroduction on the Isle of Wight.
On the Isle of Wight, yes, okay.
So we are working with them on our osprey project. They're running the eagle project. And several of the white-tailed eagles have also become resident in Poole Harbour. So not only were we showing people ospreys, wild in Poole Harbour on these boat trips, we had bloody sea eagles, white-tailed eagles flying around as well. And it was just all of a sudden this totally different landscape. 5-10 years ago, no chance of ever seeing either of those species either breeding or just being present in Poole Harbour. But now they're back because of hard work and dedication and focus and collaborations, all those kind of things. And it is so inspiring. It is really, really inspiring. And I think that definitely feeds into people's excitement and understanding of how things can be improved if people are quick, dedicated and brave as well. Actually, to do reintroductions, you need to be quite brave with your approach.
Okay, right. So I'm now putting all this together in my mind, because obviously at some point I'm going to give you some feedback on my purpose, or what I interpreted. Sorry, your purpose, my interpretation of your purpose. So there is something around this. It's like the recovery of society happening through the recovery of nature. You know, so you've got this tenfold increase from your 3 boat trips and 150 people initially to 1,600 people on 30 boats. You've now got ospreys resident in Poole Harbour, along with visiting sea eagles from the Isle of Wight. And there is a thirst, there is a nerdy thirst for this. That you don't, sometimes, you know, if you build it, they will come, as the quote from the film.
We use that term a lot. It's definitely right. That's such a good term.
Yeah. And so you've built that through being the brave nerd, if you like. And just talking about what you are passionate about. When you arrived in Arn, you said you'd found your place. Said, this is where I belong. This is my purpose. Maybe that was a place that you could be brave, you know, or maybe it wasn't.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Maybe it was brave to begin with, but I don't know. What do you think, Paul? Was it always about being brave, or did it change to be something else?
The initial work when I got to Arn, it wasn't so much the bravery, it was just the comfort, and, you know, feeling so comfortable meeting like-minded people and talking to like-minded people, working with like that. It was bliss, complete and utter bliss. I hadn't, you know, when I worked on the boats, yes, I loved it, but was I any good at it? No, not really. Did I almost kill myself about 10 times? Yes. You know, it was an amazing experience. And, you know, everyone that helped me through that part of my journey, I will always be forever grateful to, because it was such a huge part of my life. But the conservation part of it, when I got to Arn, it was just the immediate comfort. But then, as you know, anyone that develops their career or evolves their career, you know, the challenges get bigger, and the structure, maybe the kind of the structure changes, and you have more to deal with. And there's a lot, and one of the negatives of social media is there are a lot more eyes on you, because obviously we promote a lot of our work through social media. So when you do take on something like a reintroduction with wild animals, you know, there are a lot more eyes on you, questioning why you're doing it, questioning the method, questioning the need, or, you know, all these different things. So you've got to hold fast and stick to your purpose and your reasons to why you're doing these things, and, you know, try and take people on the journey with you, which we do very, very effectively, you know, and our work would be nothing without support from the public. It's really, really important.
And those the different ways that people can approach you, whether they are supporters or people who question you, they're all showing interest, aren't they? So you're going to get people arriving from different sides, but I can see that when they will interact with you and they hear the story and what you've been doing, and actually demonstrated that tenfold increase, people get behind the same project and push it down that road. You know, I use the analogy all the time of a car on a road being pushed by one person, and it's very important to that one person to get that car down there somewhere, and that represents that person's purpose. There are goals involved, there's a vision, there's a way of doing that. And from the time that you were at school being the herpetologist, you've been pushing a car, and how visible you have been has changed over time, especially when you got to Arn. And you have continued, you've built momentum up. So it sounds like it's easy. It's been easier over time for people to get behind that same car with you, whether they arrive behind and say, I can see what you're clearly doing here and I'm with you, or whether they are in front of the car going, what are you doing? What is this?
Yeah.
And so, well done. I mean, that takes guts.
Well, it's the people that I work with will always sound a bit over keen and, you know, quite manic. But when so we now host, over the course of the calendar year, we now host probably in excess of 150 boats in total now, ranging from either focusing on ospreys and eagles to looking at puffins in the summer, although that population's really under threat in the Purbex. What else do we focus on? We do stuff on the land as well, so we do scientific research and ringing work around Poole Harbour, and we invite the public to come and see that as well, because that's really interesting work. But what it does allow us to do, now we've got this platform, and this is, I suppose, the most overriding reason, or one of the main reasons I do what I do, is because when big problems come along, it allows us to communicate to a much bigger audience. So perfect example was in the last few weeks, months, and I don't want this to get political, so don't worry. Okay. But there is potentially a huge risk to UK nature laws. So I'll just give you a quick example. So obviously when we left the EU, UK laws, or sorry, certain laws were going to change. But before leaving the European Union, we were bound by what's called the Habitats Directives and the Birds Directives. And they are without doubt some of the best environmental laws in the world. They were so good, most of them. And they were what afforded Poole Harbour its protection. So things like the SPA, the special protection areas, and the Ramsar sites, all this kind of stuff. Well, there has been talk recently and worry that post-Brexit, a lot of those laws are going to be watered down. So we could lose SPA protection and designation, or, we could lose the triple SIs, the sites of special scientific interest, all these things, which would be a disaster, a total and utter disaster. Because the reason Poole Harbour has stayed the way it has for so long is because developers can't just come and build, on pristine bits of land around the harbour. Anyway, so there was a big call to arms that all the big national nature conservation organisations, RSPB, National Trust, all the wildlife trusts, went to their members and said, write to your MPs to let them know that you do not want deregulation, you actually want improved environmental regulation. And on every single boat that we've done over the last 2 months, we've really pushed that home from a local perspective. So, regardless if you live in North Poole or West Dorset, South Dorset, whoever your MP is, please write to them and let them know what your thoughts are on deregulating the environment and environmental protection.
Okay.
So we don't know what the outcome of that is yet and whether it's been effective or not, but it's certainly allowed us to do the call to arms that's needed locally.
Okay, right. So that's something that I personally can go and do after this call, after this interview, and I'll probably seek out some more information from you, Paul, about that. So in this area specifically, are we talking about writing to our MPs about the Habitats Directives?
Yes, basically.
Okay. And where would be a good source of information for people to go to kind of get the gist of it and to work out maybe some of the kind of correct wording or the action points that
well, it's tricky at the moment because government have responded to all the big conservation organizations saying this is nonsense, there's absolutely no plan to deregulate any of the stuff. But it's the RSPB have got a huge amount on their websites about it at the moment. So the National Trust and the Wildlife Trusts, all on their social media feeds at the moment. They've got lots and lots. In fact, the night the story broke, which was a Friday night about 3-4 weeks ago, the main RSPB Twitter account did like a 13 post thread about what the current situation is. But we've had a different prime minister since then.
Oh, have we?
God knows
just the fifth one in the last
situation is now. But I think it's just important for anyone that's interested in natural history and Poole Harbour or any of their local nature sites, just to be keeping an eye on that and just see, what the current situation is.
I hope that I think I'm going to trust my gut and say that I think this is correct, is that there is a greater attachment to nature because people have had no choice but to go and be out in nature when COVID hit. And I mean, I used to swim quite a lot down at my local beach, and you'd have a few people down there, in the mornings at like 6:30.
Yeah.
During COVID, and since, it has not waned. That car park is full by 7 a.m., 7:15 a.m. And there are multiple groups of people swimming. And so people have, they've kind of had a shove which has got them in contact with nature again. You know, I say once you leave the sand and you enter the sea, you are in the wilderness. That is the border of wilderness. You're entering the sea, and that has not waned. So I hope that the same is true, Paul, for people who are visiting Arn or walking around the edges of Poole Harbour or in the Purbex. It's had, you know, just by osmosis, it's had an effect on somebody, so that there is more likelihood that they will go, hey, I don't want this to change, or I want it to change for a good reason, and get behind such movements.
Yeah, we've seen the same. I mean, so one of the things we do more for fun than anything is on really windy September, October mornings, we'll go down to Branksome Chine, and we will set up our telescopes tucked away in the beach huts and watch migrating seabirds going up and down Poole Bay. And 10 years ago, when we used to do that, there'd be no one there at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, which is when we go down there to do it. And now we go down there 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on September, October, even November mornings. And like you say, there's people swimming out across Branksome Chine, and you look down the beach and there's people swimming down towards Shore Road and, you know, those places. So the enthusiasm definitely hasn't waned. And I mean, that also does come with its challenges, though, and there's things we need to work out. So one of the big spike in interest is paddle boarding.
Yes.
You know, huge numbers of people now paddle boarding around the harbour. And these wetland bird surveys I was talking about earlier, they happen on very specific days at very specific times. So all the data is, we know, collective and robust. But anyway, like, I can be out and I survey one of the most remotest areas in Poole Harbour, down on the southern shores, you know, miles from anywhere. And post lockdown, when I was out there surveying, I had paddle boarders coming up into areas that would then flush all the birds and they would all disappear. And that's damaging for a few reasons, because the birds are being forced away from their most productive feeding sites, and they're also using really important energy reserves, which they don't really want to do. So that's where the education comes in, because what we don't want to do is stop anyone from enjoying the harbour. It is absolutely there for everyone to enjoy, whether it's for nature or for recreational use, you know. But there needs to be a cooperative approach to making sure people aren't having a negative impact when they're going out and enjoying the harbour.
So that knowledge of that, you know, knowledge is power. So when someone understands the full picture, they're, you know, I believe that, you know, most people are good people. So there is I suppose a job there to deliver that information in a manner which engineers the success, so, you know, that successful outcome of people still enjoying the outdoors, but also contributing to what you're trying to create.
And also, hopefully that kind of evolves their purpose as well, because you'd think that, you know, they may be going out into that landscape to deal with those things that we've been talking about. So that maybe they may be anxious, maybe they'd be worried about a current work or life situation, and are going into that landscape to deal with it. And will probably feel mortified that maybe some of the actions that they're having are having a massive negative impact on local ecology. So it'd be really nice if, and don't get me wrong, there are lots of local organisations already working on this, but making sure that when they're going out, they have a purpose to actually, you know, maybe even do some monitoring, or, like I say, some of this citizen science thing, and recording the data or the birds that they see, or seals, for example. There's lots of seals in Poole Harbour now, which there never used to be, really. And it's the Dorset Wildlife Trust log all the seal sightings from around Poole Harbour. So, and quite often the paddle boarders see them.
Yeah, I have, definitely.
Yeah, well, there we go. You know, making a mental note where they've seen seals around the harbour whilst they've been out paddle boarding, and submit that data to the Dorset Wildlife Trust. So, you know, there's all these added extra elements people can do to improve their environmental understanding, but also make it worthwhile from a data point of view. And, you know, hopefully it's a win-win for everybody, just as long as they know that some of the things they shouldn't be doing, you know, or make sure the things they do don't have a negative impact on the environment.
Right. So, okay, I've written a lot of notes. I've got 6 bits of paper in front of me. Jotted things down, and so I try and come up with a metaphor for you when you're at your peak, you know. And there was something around you arriving at Arn and discovering kind of where you belong, that maybe the actual geographical location of your purpose, which has obviously grown to be other things. But I've written down the blissfully brave conservationist, like you, blissful in the sense that, oh, I belong here. And that sense of belonging allows you to be brave, and you're a conservationist. So that's my metaphor for you at the moment, the blissfully brave conservationist. Can you think of an animal that most closely embodies someone who's blissfully brave and is a conservationist? Not easy. I don't know.
Blissfully brave. I don't know. Whenever, there's always a question, if you could be any animal, what would it be? Or if you associated with any animal, what would it be?
Okay.
I always just think I'm a Labrador.
Black Lab, Brown Lab. What do you think?
Probably Black Lab. My mother-in-law had 2 Black Labs that I love dearly, and they both sadly passed away recently.
I didn't know that, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah. So probably be a Black Lab. But I just, always eager to please. Just love life. Always hungry. And just just never stops going, really. But this is even nerdier. So this behind me here, we're just coming to the end now of autumn migration. So right the way from really July until now, millions of different birds are moving south for the winter, of lots and lots and lots of different species. But the final migration that takes place, and it's normally about this week of November, this first or second week of November, is the wood pigeon migration.
Okay.
And most people get well, bloody hell, what's so interesting about wood pigeons? And to be honest, when you get 1 or 2 in your garden, it's not that interesting. But the first or second week of November, there is often this almighty migration across the top of Poole Harbour that no one really knows about because it goes quite high. And it can be anything up to between 150 to 160,000 that move in a single morning over a few hours.
Wow. And
the conditions seemed good this morning for it to potentially happen. So I've got my telescope set up here because my daughter's bedroom looks due southeast out towards the harbour. And if the pigeons start moving, then I can watch them. But it didn't happen this morning, so I'm gonna have to wait even longer.
Okay, and this is on the edge of the harbour, is it, or would it be over town?
Yeah, they come in. It's really weird. They come in fairly low. It starts as soon as the sun rises. The first bit of sun rises over the horizon. The first flocks of 10, 20, 50, 100 come in over the top of Evening Hill from Sandbank.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So I often, my friend Mark lives in Poole, and we go and stand on. He's got a purpose-built pigeon platform on his house.
Okay.
We're going to stand on and count the pigeons, or down at Beta if people want to go and try and watch this. And over the course of the morning, the numbers just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they come up over Evening Hill, over Beta, and then they take this really high straight line over Brownsea, head southwest over towards, kind of Swanage way, really.
Yeah.
And then we think they go down into the cork oak forests into Portugal and Spain. We don't 100% know, but that's what we assume, because they kind of arc off southwest across the English Channel, never to be seen again.
So they're kind of coming around anti-clockwise around the harbour, in effect. So Evening Hill, Beta, and then
but they're high. They're really high. You can barely see them.
Okay.
But when they're coming in over Evening Hill, they're much, much lower. But yeah. So anyway, that's the kind of that's the nerdy thing we're on at the moment. But again, it's just those kind of things that people don't know, and we get an absolute buzz of telling people that this stuff is happening right over their heads in Poole Town Centre, and they don't even know it. And that is just a big part of my drive, is always just trying to get over to people information that is just different and fascinating.
And when they have that information and they act on it, what do you think the impact is on them?
Well, it's an addiction. It's whether people like to admit it or not. It isn't, like nature and birds especially, it's an addiction, and people get really fixated on either seeing the next good bird or experiencing something that they've never experienced before.
So what's the fix of that addiction? They've got the addiction. What does it grant them?
it grants them a tick in their book. No,
Right, so we're talking train spotting here, like, oh, seen carriage number 125.
It's personal achievement. I think nature and birds are beautiful in lots and lots of different ways. And, you know, I think what happens, people look at a kingfisher as a nice example. People look at a kingfisher in a book probably for years and years without really ever getting to see one properly. But that moment where they do see a kingfisher properly for the first time, and this is ridiculous, I'm even getting goosebumps talking about it now. That moment you see a kingfisher for the first time, it's like meeting a celebrity. You know, you've been learning about this thing for so long and wanting to see it for so long. When you do finally see it, it's like meeting a celebrity. It's just like that. Wow, this is incredible. And the nice thing about people that are into natural history, even the most dullest of birds still give people that same emotional moment. And I mean, I've got so many different examples, but my colleague Liv, a brilliant female conservationist, when we were out on one of the boats, one of our osprey boats this summer, one of the white-tailed eagles flew close to the boat, and it was just this magical moment where everyone just stopped and jaws hit the ground because we couldn't believe what we were seeing. These birds have got an 8-foot wingspan. They are huge.
Wow.
Flew past the boat, and I turned to Liv as if to say, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And she was crying her eyes out because it meant that much to her to see this bird back in the landscape. It was beautiful. It was iconic. It was momentous. And she was in floods of tears. And I think that's what nature and birds do for people. It's an emotional connection, either to a time or to a place or to an ambition, really, that means more than a lot of people may realize. And those different fixes are different for different people. You know, some people get their fix off going off and ticking lots of rare birds. That's fine, not for me, but I know a lot of people love doing it. But there's a huge amount of people that just embrace the beauty of nature, and when it presents itself after years and years of trying, when it finally presents itself, it is just a really emotional moment. And I think that's what a lot of people get out of nature, is it gives them a chance to emotionally embrace beauty, really.
Wow. Okay, that's really powerful. And you're you're a gatekeeper of sorts to that, Paul. Whether people know that gate exists or not. So, I want to say that you are the blissfully brave Black Lab. Okay. Who and the impact you have is that you allow people to access nature's goosebumps of wow. The blissfully brave Black Labrador who allows people to access nature's goosebumps of wow, or nature's emotional goosebumps of wow. You can see it's a process that's ongoing.
I might put that on my LinkedIn page.
Wow. Okay. So for you and for everyone,
I'm not on LinkedIn. I don't even know what it is.
The idea of purpose, I think, has to be personal. Personally, I think the most powerful purposes are personal, and they can mean nothing to anyone else. But this is the importance of this interview. Part of it is to demonstrate how we've come up with this. And I invite you to try this on for size, because it's just an offering and it can be adapted and changed. And you might think something a bit different. But when we first started talking, and I said when I was rowing back in the day, my coach had been a launch and looking at me from the side from where I couldn't see myself. So I've been sat in a launch, listening and looking at you as you tell your story. And I'm seeing that when you're at your height and you're loving what you're doing, you're the blissfully brave Black Labrador. And the impact you have is that you allow people to access nature's goosebumps of wow. And there's something around the emotional attachment to that as well in there. So what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I think out of all the stuff that I do, I mean, I love the hands-on work, you know, when we're raising the osprey chicks, and, you know, all that is just mind-blowing stuff. You know, I even got an opportunity to help with the white-tailed eagles on the Isle of Wight last year, and I got to hold a white-tailed eagle whilst they were putting one of the tags on. So I love all that stuff, but without doubt, and the thing that when I'm driving home from work and I will be on an absolute high, I will be on the ceiling, is when I know that we've delivered a really high-end piece of public information, either on a boat trip or via a course. Or actually, the other thing I've not even mentioned, which we do as a charity, which is so important, and again, probably one of the most important things we do, is we host something called the School Bird Boat Project. So completely free of charge, we take out about 1,300 school kids on boat trips around Poole Harbour through the winter, talking to them about the SPA, the Special Protection Area, talking to them about spoonbills and eagles and ospreys and reintroductions and all these kind of things. And when I finish one of those boat trips, or have shown people their very first eagle or their very first osprey, and I've seen that emotional reaction, that is when I'm absolutely at my peak, you know, right. Because I just know that I've had an impact, really. You know, everything I try and do, I make sure has an impact in one way or another. And those are the moments where I'm just like, yeah, that's what we need to be doing.
Okay, so seeing that all your hard work being represented in the emotional impact it has on somebody.
Yeah, people's responses, seeing people's responses, and the best thing we've ever had. Well, actually, that's a complete lie. One of the nicest things we've had recently was we did a boat trip earlier this year, and we saw ospreys and eagles from that boat trip. This was April, and one of the customers got off the boat, and as he left, he said, "Wow, bloody hell, that was better than Mull." Now, Mull up in Scotland is the most famous place people go to in the UK to go and try and see white-tailed eagles and ospreys and things like that.
Right.
And so when this guy got off the boat and went, "Wow, this is better than Mull," I just went, that's when something kind of hit me, and I realized what was happening. You know, I knew it had been a good boat. We'd seen lots of other stuff as well, but I was just like, I get it now. This is how things are changing. And that was it was probably quite an off the cuff remark from him, but that had a huge impact because it made me realize, you know, we're now entering a new phase.
Wow, that's such a compliment, isn't it? That's very specific as well. Very specific, holding yourself up against a different marker like that. Okay, so yeah, I'm still going to come back with being the blissfully brave black lab who grants access to nature's emotional wows.
Yeah, I'll take that.
That's what I see in you, Paul, when you describe what you do and how you do it. The blissfully brave black Labrador who grants access to nature's emotional wows.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot. I've now got some investigations to do myself, probably to have a further conversation with you as well. Seeing as we've got an audience here, where can they visit to check out your work? Where would you like to direct people to, given your current latest projects that you'd like people to know about? What would you like us to include?
Yeah, so all of our info is so the Birds of Poole Harbour, which is just birdsofpooleharbour.co.uk. All of the all of our events are on there, so all the boat trips and things that we do, which is just on the booking link, but also all the detailed information of things like our osprey reintroduction. Click on ospreys and you can get the whole history of the project on there. What's the other thing which I didn't mention actually, which has been a huge hit this year, was that yes, we had success with the ospreys breeding for the first time, but we managed to just in time this early spring get a webcam on that nest. So all summer people have been watching the live webcam of these ospreys breeding and raising their chicks, which was just dynamite, absolutely dynamite. Anyway, we are upgrading our camera this winter, so next spring, fingers crossed, these ospreys return from Africa safely. You know, we will have an even better camera on the nest next spring. And if anyone hasn't tuned in to watch that, I highly recommend it, because it is just stunning, absolutely stunning. So look on that. And we're very active on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook and things like that. So yeah, just go and check it all out.
Will do. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.